Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Welcome back to School of Emo. Today, we're going to talk about a band that I never really considered fully emo. They were a bit before my time in the scene and a bit before that third wave of emo that I was more a part of. But I've read other emo historians' takes on the history of emo and how we moved from the first and second wave into the third wave into more of the mainstream side of emo and pop punk and what we know of it all today, and even what we see today with festivals like When We Were Young and the Emo's Not Dead movement and all these different things. And this band came up so many times, and the more that I dug into them and their history and some of their music, the more it makes a lot of sense. I just never put it together at first. So I hope that this is an eye-opening and exciting episode for you too, if you were in the same shoes, black eyeliner I was in. And that is Jimmy Eat World. So we are going to go all the way back to 1993. I was 1 year old. So back in the day in Mesa, Arizona, where Jimmy Eat World was formed. So the lineup we have is Jim Atkins on lead vocals and lead guitar, Tim Linton on guitar and vocals, Zach Lind on drums, and then we had Michael Porter on bass. Just as a note, in 1995, a few years later, Porter actually left and was replaced by the bassist Rick Birch, who has been with the band ever since, kind of solidifying that consistent lineup of Atkins, Linton, Lind, and Birch, the lineup that we even know today. And that is a big deal because that is a long time for a band to be together and for all of the kind of core members of the band to be together, even if there was that one change in the early years. Now, before we get into some of their history, the name is unique, right? And there's a lot to talk about the name, but it's so fascinating because this actually came about from a sibling story. This was a sibling thing, not necessarily an intentional band name to begin with. So looking at Tom Linton, the guitar backup vocals, his younger brother Ed drew a picture after Tom's older brother Jim beat him up. And in the picture, Jim was eating the world. So Ed captioned it, Jimmy Eat World. The name just stuck. So Tom called it a stupid name, but also embraced the oddness and took it with him, a piece of his history, sort of painful history, I guess, into the future of the band. And they have kept the name ever since in every step of the way, which makes their name so unique. I have never thought twice about how odd the name Jimmy Eat World actually is because I grew up with it. It was around, right? It was already popular, but I can only imagine the very early days. And if you were around during the early 90s, when they started hitting, the scene and their music was out there and you heard their name for the first time, what you thought about it, because maybe it is a bit odd thinking back, but it didn't seem odd at the time just because they were already popular at the time that I heard about them and started listening to them. Now, there are some theories that the name has somewhat of a deeper meaning. We're going to talk about how the band has been in through some interesting periods of time. And so there's been some theories from fans, especially about how there might be some deeper meaning to it. But the band has confirmed over and over again that it does not have any deeper meaning. There's no special anecdotes beyond what the sibling story that was already told. And so any interpretations beyond that are simply coincidental and like fans probably pulling pieces together versus it truly being related to the actual name. So let's go into their early years and their early days. So after the band was formed, they released a few early releases, including their debut EP, 1, 2, 3, 4 in 1994. And this was actually released through Wood and Blue Records. So it wasn't fully self released. They did have a record backing for this EP. And then in 1994, a little later, they released their first studio album, self titled Jimmy Eat World, building off of the momentum from that EP. So, very quickly into their career, 2 albums pretty much released. Then, a few years later, in 1996, they released Static Prevails, which was their second album, and this was with Capitol Records. So they moved to a bigger label because of the success of Jimmy Eat World. This is where they saw this shift from more of this pop punk, skate punk sound into more of a post hardcore emo style. And if you remember from our history of emo, this was around that second wave, right? Moving towards the third wave in the 2000s. And so this is where emo was more underground, like that post punk piece it was really building. Pop punk wasn't necessarily as strong yet, right? We talked about that with Green Day. And so they kind of moved into that more kind of post hardcore emo genre. So this fed into their third studio album in 1999 called Clarity. This is considered a landmark for them. This was a big deal. This was a turning point for their career because it was more ambitious. There was more dynamic sound, more texture to it, more expansion of the sound. And it became a cult favorite for those who were fans of the band. But unfortunately, again, this was before the big explosion of commercial acceptance, I guess, of emo. It was not the best performing album when it came to like the commercial success of it. So because of that, and Capitol Records being such a big label that demanded commercial success for their artists, they actually dropped them after it failed to deliver the big sales they were hoping for. So a height with being able to release a couple of albums with Capitol, but then this one, even though fans loved it, because it didn't do as well, it tanked in terms of their relationship with Capitol. But despite the band being dropped, the band kept writing and touring. They delivered songs like Lucky Driver Mint from Clarity, which got some traction, especially on college radio, film soundtracks, underground spaces, and all of the like. I listened to or I read a book that again an emo historian wrote talking about this point of emo as a whole, and a lot of bands were struggling because this sound again wasn't necessarily accepted commercially. If you look at the punk space, they didn't necessarily want things to be accepted commercially, which was unfortunate. But for Jimmy Eat World, there was a moment where the band considered not continuing, but they decided to like stick it out and kind of take a bet on themselves at this period where they didn't have the backing of the label. Like from on paper, right? It looks like it was a complete failure. Like most bands would probably say, like, okay, we tried the record label, we got it quickly, and then we completely failed. So that's not in the cards for us. Like we're not going to be able to make money or put something out that's going to be successful, right? You would easily think that because of just what this appeared to be. But the band stuck it out and they chose to keep moving forward. They chose to believe in what they had with their sound and their art. And they pushed on to then give us in 2001 Bleed American, which was their breakout moment. Everything that Clarity maybe wanted to be, right? What Capitol wanted Clarity to be, but more raw and real. And because it was self funded by the band, it was a huge risk, but it definitely paid off. So this album was initially titled Bleed American. It was released in, I believe, July of 2001. But a few months after that, September 11th happened, and they reissued it under the name Jimmy Eat World to avoid insensitivity. So, frontman Jim Atkins later explained in an interview, "We worked so hard on this thing, but we decided in the wake of the craziness and tragedy, we didn't want to have something block people from objectively connecting with it." So, because of the name, it could have been controversial. And so they shifted it to Jimmy Eat World, to technically their second self titled album. And then eventually they came back to Bleed American later on. So this album gave us some of the key singles, the biggest song they're known for, The Middle, Sweetness, A Praise Chorus, Bleed American, and so many more. With The Middle becoming their signature song, it soared up in the charts and has continued to be their most highly streamed, kind of most popular song. So, looking at the origin of this song specifically, like a lot of the big songs in this era that we've even talked about through some of our deep dives into some of our other bands, this was actually written pretty quickly. So Jim Atkins has said that initially he didn't think it was anything special, and then they just kind of put it together. The drummer, Zach Lynn, said after hearing the demo, he thought there's not really a whole lot to change here, just kind of went with it. And the song's lyrics, the "Hey, don't write yourself off yet," were in part inspired by a fan who wrote to them about being an outsider at school, feeling left out. So they kind of just took that energy, put it into something, kept it casual, and moved on. Did not expect it to be what it became, and probably had no idea that it would be what it continues to be today. This is one of my favorite songs of all time. So we are going to go into the lyrics. Hey, don't write yourself off yet. It's only in your head. You feel left out or looked down on. Just try your best. Try everything you can. And don't you worry what they tell themselves when you're away. It just takes some time. Little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything, everything will be just fine. Everything, everything will be all right. All right. Hey, you know they're all the same. You know you're doing better on your own, so don't buy in. Live right now. Yeah, just be yourself. It doesn't matter if it's good enough for someone else. It just takes some time. Little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything, everything will be just fine. Everything, everything will be all right. All right. It just takes some time. Little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything, everything will be just fine. Everything, everything will be all right. All right. Hey, don't write yourself off yet. It's only in your head you feel left out or looked down on. Just do your best, do everything you can, and don't you worry what their bitter hearts are going to say. Bleed American was certified platinum in the US and Canada and became a staple of the early 2000s rock radio and MTV, which helped push forward that third wave of emo and also helped open the door to larger audiences. I want you to go back to the Dashboard Confessional conversation that we had, an episode, because a lot of what was happening with Chris Carrabba and Dashboard at the time is very similar to what is happening with Jimmy Eat World during this period. This was where there was more fan acceptance. And because of streaming that began, right, the kind of more illegal stealing music type of streaming that we did back in the early 2000s, but also fueled by MTV, TRL, even on radio, like the top five, all of the connection that we had to music and the ability for music to become viral in that sense and popular based on fans, not just the industry, was really important. And that's something that Jimmy Eat World achieved with this album and especially with The Middle. What's fascinating is that they were able to achieve that on their own. So Dashboard, Chris Carrabba took the sort of LimeWire, LiveJournal, the online route with his music, whereas Jimmy Eat World had already had the backing. So they had a bit of a platform. They had a bit of a connection to the fans already and went the route of a self-funded album, doing it more on their own, really sticking to that emo punk ethos of do it yourself. The album was more accessible. It had a cleaner production, more radio friendly hooks, and without completely losing the band's earlier like vulnerability and emo heart. So let's walk through some of their other albums. This is where the band really rose and hit the height of their fame, and they continued to explore. But what came next, and how did their sound continue to change? So in 2004, we got the album Futures. This was released in October of that year and was the first album to reach top 10 on the Billboard 200 for them. This gave us songs like Pain, Work, features that show a more polished songwriting, perhaps more of an arena rock kind of influence. And the lyrical content still had that introspection, dealing with relationships, doubt, very vulnerable, very much aligned with that emo spirit. Pain is an incredible song. So we're going to go through those lyrics. I don't feel the way I've ever felt. I know. Gonna smile and not get worried. I try, but it shows. Anyone can make what I've built, and better now. And anyone can find the same white pills. It takes my pain away. It's a lie I kiss with open eyes, and she's not breathing back. Anything would bother me. Never mind, these are horrid times. Oh, 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 I can't let it bother me. I never thought I'd walk away from you. I did, but it's a false sense of accomplishment every time I quit. Anyone can see my every flaw. It isn't hard. Anyone can say they're above this all. It takes my pain away. It's a lie I kiss with opened eyes, and she's not breathing back. Well, anything would bother me. Never mind, these are horrid times. Oh, 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 I can't let it bother me. It takes my pain away. It's a lie I kiss with opened eyes, and she's not breathing back. Anything but bother me. Never mind, these are horrid times. Oh, 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 I can't let it bother me. It takes my pain away. Next, a year after that, we got Chase This Light in 2007, which was their sixth studio album. And this is where their sound began to shift slightly more towards a streamlined rock. So, more into the rock space, more production, and a little bit of pop crossover elements. In 2010, they put out a more ambitious record with Invented. And this was more about experimentation. So, this is where they included songs that had more of a different narrative perspective to it compared to how they had formed their songs prior. This is also where Tom Linton actually took lead vocals on one of the songs, which kind of was a return in some ways to their earlier sound and how they originally started with Jim and Tom kind of sharing vocals. But this was after Jim Atkins had been kind of known through most of the albums as the lead. And then in 2013, we got Damage, which gave us themes of broken relationships and maturity. In interviews, Atkins has said that this was a point in his life where relationships were not the same as when he was writing in his 20s, and he wanted that to show. So, wanted to show that maturity and just the phase of life that they were in. We see this with a lot of bands that continue to put out music. If they try to stick to their earlier sounds, sometimes they struggle to connect. But when they grow and continue to put out music that is connected to their life experiences and the things that are going on in the world with their fans and what, collectively what people are noticing, they see a lot more success. And that's something they saw in that album, even if it wasn't as commercially successful as Bleed American was or some of the earlier music. It was still impactful. I do want to go through the lyrics of the self-titled track for that album, Damage. I want someone who lives up to this grandeur in my head. And you don't do much to sell me. I'd be best with you instead. I hate the way I feel, but I don't think I can change. I just breathe you each day. Are we only damaging the little we have left? Both of us swimming in the same polluted mess. Are we too damaged now to possibly connect, to honestly connect? A lot of time's been wasted putting off doing the work. If we both step up to own it, then I'll take what's coming first. Of everything you say, it's the truth that really hurts. But how could that be worse? Are we only damaging the little we have left? Both of us swimming in the same polluted mess. Are we too damaged now to possibly connect, to ever reconnect? I'll say when I'm ready. You'll know when I'm ready, when I'm ready. Are we only damaging the little we have left? Both of us swimming in the same polluted mess. Are we too damaged now to possibly connect, to honestly connect? A few later, 2016, we got Integrity Blues, and this was produced with Justin Meldal Johnson and was considered by many critics to be one of their most introspective records that they had put out. It was more atmospheric, more emotional depth, and was praised for its lyricism and its production. So, in some ways, going back to the emo roots without as much of the post hardcore sound tied to it. And this is where we got the song Sure and Certain. The clever ways I try to change happen and pass, leaving me the same. Of course, it must be something else. Leading questions I might ask myself. Sure and certain, wonder till we're old. Lost and lurking, wonder till we're cold. What you do works for a time until you drop without a warning sign. If you keep going on like this, I'll be one more thing for you to miss. Sure and certain, wander till we're old. Lost and lurking, wonder till we're cold. A couple of years later, we got the album Surviving, which was their 10th studio album, produced in 2019 or released in 2019. This continued the exploration of the life of the band decades in, dealing with expectations, survival, and a changing music landscape. And again, was connected to who they were, what they were going through at that time. Before we get into the lyrics of, one of the singles of this is, they were formed in 1993. 2019, before the 2020s, 10 albums in. Like when we look back at, the Clarity to Bleed American dropped by Capitol Records era of their career and how it would have made sense to quit at that time, but they didn't. I think looking into the future and seeing how much they must love and connect to the art and the each other as a band, the music itself, like all of it, because how do you have that type of motivation and resolve to keep going? And especially with Bleed American, it was sort of a comeback in a way. It was also a peak, which is okay. Artists see that, they experience that. That's normal, it's expected. But to continue to put out so many beautiful albums and continue to explore music and explore sounds, it's not something we see that often, especially in this world. And while they might have gotten further away from true emo and the emo hardcore, whatever, they weren't really part of that third wave of emo, which really moved into more theatrics and more of a pop punk crossover, very pop heavy type of influence to it. They didn't really lean into that. The fourth wave of emo, definitely not leaning into, but they began to grow up and just experience music for themselves and bring their fans along, which is really powerful. So in this album, 2019, we got singles like All the Way, Stay, Love Never, and a big hit, 555. In those lyrics, I keep my focus on the simple things, try to find some peace along the way. Wish I knew how long I'm supposed to wait. Holding on, but just barely. Got the feeling I've been talking to a dead line. Always a reason to let it change. Is there anyone there listening while you cry, cry, cry? Always a reason for the pain. I'm doing the things I've been told every day, every day, every day. Then why does it feel like I'm moving in place, in place, in place? Never had anything to prove, but never was anyone like you. All you fought through, all you had to face, made you stronger, unafraid. Got the feeling I've been talking to a dead line. Always a reason to let it change. Is there anyone there listening while you cry, cry, cry? Always a reason for the pain. I'm doing the things I've been told every day, every day, every day. Then why does it feel like I'm moving in place, in place, in place? I gotta believe that you're there when I sing, when I sing, when I sing. Because if you're not real, then I'm losing my head, in my head, in my head. Got the feeling I've been talking to a dead line. Always a reason to let it change. Is there anyone there listening while you cry, cry, cry? Always a reason for the pain. I'm doing the things I've been told every day, every day, every day. Then why does it feel like I'm moving in place, in place, in place? I gotta believe that you're there when I sing, when I sing, when I sing. Because if you're not real, then I'm losing my head in my head in my head. I keep my focus on the simple things, trying to find some peace along the way. So, what happened after 2019? In 2022, we got a single, Something Loud, which is an independent single. And Atkins talked about how after touring and the slowdown during COVID, seeing other bands and festivals gave them inspiration for something new. And the song was also more reflective, looking back on early touring and how those formative moments are often missed in the rush. This is something we saw a lot of bands do. I think, we saw this from the Used. They talked about some of the earlier days and some of their more recent post 2020 albums. We also saw this from Story of the Year in their album released after 2020 as well. A lot of bands seem to, maybe because of their age at this time, but I think a lot of us got more introspective during 2020. And to have a career that you've spent most of your life doing and connected to, especially one that's very connected to live performance and connection to fans physically, having that taken away for so long, I'm sure does spark a lot of those memories and just seeing things with a different lens and perspective because of the slowdown. And that was showcased in Something Loud. So again, we're going to go through the lyrics. We're going through so many lyrics in this episode. One, because this band has a million albums. They have so much music for us to dive into, but they're also so powerful. And I think one thing that I love about emo as a whole and this whole genre and sound is that it's so connected to what we feel, and lyricism is so important as part of that, not just the sound itself, but the lyrics behind it are really valuable. And I think Jimmy Eat World does a fantastic job at really leaning into their lyrics. So here is Something Loud. I walked around for days in a familiar place. This time I finally let myself own every small feeling. There was the one who got away. There was a first for everything. Never a second guess if I was right where I should be. Do you know what I mean? All night. Do you still feel part of something loud? All night. Are you such a different person now? A dream that never was, an idea you think you come from? All night. When you can't look at the day, I had it figured out. The way it really is. And growing up, we'd added just too much complexity. Friends at the show in 95, miss every one of them. But there's a moment that you die or you move on to live. Every one of us did all night. Do you still feel part of something loud all night? Are you such a different person now? A dream that never was, an idea you think you came from all night. When you can't look at the day, I had what I had, and goddamn, I would change not a single thing. So smile, wave, then let go all night. Do you still feel part of something loud all night? Are you such a different person now? A dream that never was, an idea you think you come from all night. When you can't look at the day, when you can't look at the day, when you can't look at the day. So while this band has produced those 10 albums, they've released them, they've got singles still coming, hopefully, maybe some coming soon or an album coming soon. They've stuck it out. They've been together, but that has not come with challenges and controversies, less controversies, more challenges along the way. The biggest one being the dropping of them from Capitol Records. So after Static Rebels and Clarity, despite the critical acclaim that they got, the commercial, I guess, not following suit fully led to them being dropped. And that was a low moment, but they used it when they wrote Bleed American independently, took risks, and were able to put that out under their own name and fully from themselves. They've also had some issues with the term emo and emo identity, because while the term can be incredible and we connect to it now, it has been more of a double-edged sword over time. So some fans and critics embrace it while others detest it. Jimmy Eat World themselves as a band have at times accepted their emo roots, but at times they've also pushed back. Clarity is considered essentially emo. Later albums, more alternative rock or pop rock. And some purists have criticized them for becoming too polished and too mainstream, no longer fitting into what emo should be. And I say that with quotations, should, because I don't believe that is, that there is a true box to that. And we could fight over that if we want, but I'll say follow where the actual music and the money goes now and what communities drive that. Some other controversies. There was a humorous, satirical, so very, very false item that came up in their history. And this was a spoof formal apology article that claimed the band apologized for the middle, misleading people for 20 plus years, but it is completely satire. So it's a fake controversy. The band has been pretty clean from controversy, which is incredible. And then there are some controversies around how songs are used in media and licensing, but really nothing extreme and no big scandals, even with labels. Like they were dropped, yes, but they haven't had any major scandals. They haven't had any major like falling outs, like any major like beef with any other bands, like that we see again in this space a lot, maybe because they aren't so hardcore. They grew up and they have just been focused on their music. Who knows? But they have definitely like kept it steady and have stayed out of the limelight in that way, which is good. They have, though, dealt with the pressure to remain relevant and continue to put out new music and have that well accepted when Bleed American shines so brightly and is still the biggest peak that they've had. And just the hit the middle. It's a huge probably blessing and burden altogether over all music that they put out because it's such a big anthem. And I don't think anything will ever replace that or top that. It's hard to when you have such a big song, but they refused to let that be a one hit wonder. And the only thing that they put out, they kept going, which is really impactful and meaningful. Now, whether you consider them emo or not, you can't deny the impact that they had on the waves of emo and how emo really has been accepted and embraced, especially in the US, especially in 2000s and beyond. They were a major part of that. They were touring, they were releasing music, they were showing even bands that they could do things differently. And if a record label didn't accept that, that's okay. They could still explore the new sounds and still see some pretty great success, which is powerful. I've had, I'm sure, a lot of influence on bands that have followed. I would think even like Dashboard, sort of similar time periods, but probably connected. And I'm sure they leaned on each other for inspiration because of how they sort of transitioned through the scene around the same time and in a similar way. So if you have not thought about Jimmy Eat World too much, if you know the middle, but you haven't really done too much of a dive into some of the other albums, I encourage you to take what you learned today, your homework from class today, and go through some of those albums. Start at Clarity, what happened before Bleed American, listen to all of Bleed American, and then explore the albums that follow, especially some of the bigger songs and most streamed songs if you want to throughout those different albums. And note how the thread of vulnerability and connection and honesty with a changing sound clothing around it, how that shifts and moves through their entire career. And then we can all sit and wait together because the band still tours, the band still does festivals, and we'll just wait for what album is coming next. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you are new to the show, new to the channel, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on podcast too. If you want to follow along, leave a nice review that will help others find the show. And I encourage you to dive into some of our earlier episodes. You can go through, we've covered a lot of bands from pop punk legends to some of the more core emo kind of leaders to some of the more mainstream emo bands, including My Chemical Romance. We've done a few big tour recaps. We also have the origins of emo and the origins of pop punk episodes that I highly encourage. If you're very new to this space and you're not really sure what I mean by the waves of emo, or where some of these bands fit in pre or like mid 2000s, where we got the bands that you may think of as quintessentially emo today. Those are some of the best episodes I think to start with and really dive into to get a feel for what's going on here and what we're all learning about together. And as always, if you are tuning in and you're thinking about an emo experience or your own history with the emo genre, a take on it that you want to share, a band that you are dying to talk about more and get into. I would love to have you on the podcast. It is open to other members of our class. And so you can find my email in the show notes to reach out and get that scheduled so that we can have you on. I would love to talk with you and learn with and from you. So enjoy, go do your homework, and I'll see you in our next class.